What's up, guys? Thank you for tuning in to the Uncommon Mindset podcast. Today, I'm joined by a super special guest. The definition of uncommon is definitely the sky. So, today, I'm joined by Mark Devine. I'll just give you a brief background on who Mark is. Mark is the creator and founder of SEALFIT and the Unbeatable Mind Academy. He began his diverse career on Wall Street as a CPA, but quickly left behind the suit to pursue his inner vision to become a Navy SEAL officer. He was 26 when he graduated as honorman, number one ranked trainee of his SEALs Buds class, number 170. Mark served on active duty with the SEALs for 9 years and in the SEAL Reserve for 11, retiring at the rank of commander in 2011. In addition to Unbeatable Mind, Mark is also the author of 8 Weeks to SEAL Fit, Way of the SEAL, and more. Honestly, this guy is an uncommon amongst uncommon individual, and what an honor it is to have you on the podcast today, Mark.
Thank you, Murat. Appreciate that nice introduction.
No worries, no, that's totally fine. I believe a great place to start this podcast would be to take it all the way back. Talk to me about your upbringing. What was that like?
Well, I was born at a very young age in upstate New York, in a very small town. It probably looked a lot like your area in Wales. I mean, it was rolling hills, pasture land,
Mm,
lots of farming, dairy farming, and whatnot. And we weren't farmers; we were industrialists. So my father had a family business that was bequeathed to him when his father became unable to run it. So my father took that over at 30 years old. And that was really interesting because that shaped a lot of how we thought as a family, right? To be in a family business that's been around for a couple hundred years or over 100 years, I should say,
mm,
where certainly all the men in the family were kind of expected to work at the family business and to grow the family business. And it wasn't like a tiny little thing. It was, three or 400 employees, and they made heavy manufacturing equipment for industrial industry like chemical mixing machinery and industrial lathes. And of course, they got conscripted both in World War I and World War II to make stuff for the war effort. Either army helmets or things like that. At any rate, that was one thing that shaped my childhood. Right, that set of expectations that I would be either in the family business or I certainly would go into business, and that really wasn't any other career that was reasonable. I mean, my mom, I think, would include like a medical doctor as acceptable, but pretty much anything else, academia, military, church, there was no other acceptable solution. It's kind of like when I think of like old England, either or the Irish, right? One son would go into the cloth, right, and one son would become a policeman, and that was pretty much it, right?
yeah,
Maybe the other one would run the bar in the corner, right? That the family owned.
yeah, of course.
And it speaks to a lot of our work. I'm sure you as well have conversations about that. How that those expectations, those belief systems, the family of origin really shapes your very context for what it means to be a person. That some people never really break free of that, or not that it's something you have to break free of, but often, as in my case, it led to a lot of limitations and limiting patterns, as well as it was in direct contradiction to what I later learned was my spiritual path or my calling.
Mm, mm.
So
Is,
that was one thread. The other thread that was really interesting was my family was under my father was under a lot of stress. This is in the 70s and 80s, very litigious, difficult time for industry. A lot of lawsuits from.
mm,
This is before the OSHA, right? OSHA's are like occupational standards for health and safety, and so he would have people who would like cut a finger off in a machine and deal with a massive lawsuit. And he had unions to deal with. And the unions, every year the unions would demand more time off, more money. And then it got to the point where I remember my father and my older brother who worked at the business having to deal with a year-long strike. And the union basically was saying, you got two sets of books. You're making more money. And my father was like, no, we're actually haven't made any money in 5 years, and we're going to shut down if we don't come to a better agreement. And of course, the union wouldn't, just couldn't believe that this company couldn't make a profit, and it was all because the union had kept on, changing the standards, dumbing down the standards so they could, they dictate how many units of a certain thing could be made per hour. And you literally could not make more than that, even if you were capable of making twice that.
Mm.
They would shame the individuals, or they would, move them to another position. You couldn't fire someone even if they stole from the company. My father caught people stealing, siphoning gasoline out of the company vehicles, and tried to fire him. The union wouldn't let him fire him. And so here you got this crazy situation where the union had handcuffed, and I know that unions do a lot of good things, but there has to be a kind of a win-win relationship for them to work. And this was a win-lose in this
Yeah.
situation. At any rate, like I'm telling, so can you imagine the stress for an entire year? Picket lines with my father and brother, having to walk it every morning, getting spit on, and things thrown at them. And my brother's a real hothead, so they had to like literally just pin his eyes straight. My dad hired a military guy to just like hold, teach my brother just to, you know,
Yeah.
stay front sight focused and not, lash out. Hillary Clinton, you all know who she is. She was out there as senator in New York, picketing with the unions against my father, and they had a big effigy of a rat, which is the size of a building out there, and that represented my father as well as capitalists in general. It's really horrible. Stuff like that caused a lot of stress. And my father grew up in a family with a lot of alcohol and a lot of anger. And so that was a big part of my childhood, alcohol and anger.
Mm.
And I had to, I dealt with that in my own way. And that's part of the shadow that I've had to overcome, to become a great leader and a good teacher over the course of my later life. The third theme that I think is really profound was that we had this summer house. It felt like quite a privilege, even though there was a lot of chaos, and there was a lot of issues around money because the business was struggling for a long time. But we had this summer house that was also kind of passed on to the family, which is gorgeous. It was on a lake in the Adirondacks called Lake Placid. It's where they had the Olympics in 1932 and I think 1980. I was there in 80 when the United States beat the Soviet Union in hockey. The puck shot heard around the world.
Yeah.
And I was standing outside the stadium because my parents had given away our tickets because there's just like, there's no way that, the United States is going to make it to the final round with Russia. So we're standing in the road watching what we could have been inside. It was really quite interesting. But this place that we had was on the west shore of the lake, and there's no road over there, right? It's all private property. You can't get there by car. So you either have to hike in or you can take a boat. And we had this small fleet of boats. And so we'd spend the summers up there, a whole summer. So the day the school got out to the day before we started back up again. And so my front yard was this beautiful lake, and my backyard was this mountain range,
Wow.
and nothing in between. And so I learned at a very early age to find solace in nature and in sports. Not like traditional sports like rugby or soccer, but more like endurance sports, running trails, hiking, swimming. So I became an outdoor sports person, which you can see how that also kind of factored into my later choice to be an adventurous warrior.
Yeah.
Anyways, I went on a long, I hope that's kind of interesting, but those three themes came up when you asked me that question. They all kind of coincided when I graduated from, Colgate University, which is a small liberal arts school, in economics with the intention to go get some solid business experience before I went back to run the family business. And so that's what led me to Manhattan after college, working for a CPA firm named Coopers and Lybrand, which became PricewaterhouseCoopers Global, big presence in the UK also. And and so for 4 years there I was getting my master's in business administration at NYU, New York University, and I was getting, work to get my CPA certification, which was a painful process. And I also got into the martial arts, which was a big part of my turnaround from, following my parents' path to following my own path, because I was very fortunate. They say that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. I was searching for something. There was something inside of me, my soul, that was telling me there's something else out there for me, and I wasn't going to find it just in doing another, triathlon or marathon or whatever. I was something else, and I was intrigued with martial arts. I didn't know much about it because we didn't have it in our little town in upstate New York, but I did observe some at my college where I actually had a college roommate, and I watched him go from, white belt as a freshman to black belt as a senior, training diligently. And he was different. Something about him was different.
Mm,
And I wanted to see what that was. And so I stumbled upon my teacher in the form of a karate school called Seido, SEIO. And it just so happens the grandmaster, who was the founder of the school, was the teacher there. He taught most days of the week. And so, he became one of my primary teachers.
mm,
But he was also a Zen master. And so there was a very small group of us who started, who studied Zen with him, for an hour sits every Thursday evenings. And then we would do a little bit of Zen and before and after every class. And then we would go to the Zen Mountain Monastery in Woodstock, New York for these long 4-day retreats a couple times a year. And I really, really enjoyed the Zen because it helped me, calm my mind. And, in the cacophony of being in the middle of this huge city,
mm.
when I sat on that Zen bench, I felt like I was, on the trail or on the top of the mountain peaks in the Adirondacks on Lake Placid, right? It
Yeah.
felt the same, that kind of inner stillness. I also learned some incredibly valuable skills, how to control my thoughts, how to control my breath, how to remain undistracted, when I needed to focus on something for a long period of time. But something surprising, really happened that wasn't about mental control or mental development. I mean, it was, but it was tangentially related in that in the stillness, when I finally trained my mind to like shut down active mind and just rest in kind of the stillness or watchingness or what I call witness
Mm,
now, that's when I started to get pretty strong internal messages. And they came in the feelings as well as insight,
mm,
inner vision, right? And that would be like not a visualization, but some message in the form of imagery, which would show up in my mind. And it caused me to strongly suspect that I was heading down the wrong path as a CPA, MBA, chasing the money, chasing the career, heading back to the family business, whatever you want to call that.
mm,
And so I took up a journaling practice to complement my meditation practice. I just wanted to like capture these moments,
mm,
and I began to ask different questions about my life. And I had never been taught to question my life like that. I had been kind of taught the Christian values and my family values. And so I started to ask those questions, like, what am I really passionate about, and what are my values? What do I value in life? And when I asked those questions and I would sit still and get answers, I found out that it was a huge misalignment with the way I was living and what my true values were that
mm,
I was starting to understand. And then I also began to get this sensation, which I can consider to be more like an archetypal drive or urge. And I think that our calling in life has this archetypal energy. And like, you wouldn't say, Mira, that your calling was necessarily to be a podcaster,
mm.
but the archetypal energy that you're living out would be to be a teacher, right?
Yeah.
Or something like that, a spiritual leader or a, you know, a
A value
leader of
provider.
other men. I don't know. I'm making it up for you, but you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
So this archetypal energy came to me. I was very blessed at 23, 24, and it said, you're meant to be a warrior. And that, of course, that later meant warrior leader, warrior strategist, warrior teacher. And now it's evolved to be, teacher, spiritual teacher, even a healer in the sense of like making people whole through Unbeatable Mind. So when I started to pay attention to that and ask better questions about that, I said, well, if my archetypal energy and calling is to be a warrior, then how can I fulfill that?
Mm,
How can I fulfill that? I didn't know anything about the SEALs at the time. We're talking about 1987. There weren't movies and
yeah.
TV shows about the SEALs. So I started to ask questions about, if I'm meant to be a warrior, how can I fulfill that? Can I fulfill that as a CPA on Wall Street? And I was like, probably not. I mean, I could, but there were other aspects of my being that said no, like my adventurism, my risk
Mm,
tolerance, my love for the outdoors, always pointing toward no. Then I looked at other things, like I said, well, maybe I'm meant to be like like an oil person, like out on an oil rig, a roughnecker or something like that. And, if you imagine how adventurous and hard and warrior like, working in the North Sea on an oil rig would be.
Mm,
And so I began to visualize these different possibilities. I called it wearing the uniform. And so I visualized myself on an oil rig
mm,
doing that kind of stuff. And I did it for about a week. And after about a week, I was like, man, that is just brutally mind numbingly boring work. Like, there's nothing changing. Maybe if I was underwater, doing the diving part, that could be exciting. But even that was going to be tedious. And
mm,
so then I thought, well, maybe I could fly jets in the military. So I thought, I had a friend who had gone off into the Air Force, and I was like, maybe that's it. So I visualized that for a week or two and wore that uniform. And then I really kind of got the same sensation. I was like, this is cool for a little while.
mm.
But then it turns back into a routine task. And there's something about me said routine is a killer of my soul. So then one day, I even thought about the Marine Corps, and I was like, maybe this is it. But for some reason, it didn't quite inspire me the same way that I was thinking about. So I'm going through all this process. And one day I'm walking home from work and I come across a Navy recruiting office.
Mm.
And there was this poster on the wall, and the top of the poster said, be someone special. It could have said, be uncommon. It's the
Yeah.
same thing, right?
Mhm.
And didn't say anything about the SEALs. It literally just said, be someone special. And then it had pictures of SEALs doing cool shit.
Mm.
And I stood in front of that poster for like a half an hour, just transfixed. I'm like, that's it. Holy crap. Look at that. Look at that variety. Look at that adventure. Look at they're all outdoors, in the water, underwater,
Mm.
on the beach. And so the next day I went back to the recruiter's office and started that journey, which led me in 1989 to leave behind. I got my MBA, my CPA, and my first degree black belt all in November of 1989.
Wow.
And in December, I was on a bus to officer candidate school to
That's
join the Navy. And then after OCS, I went to Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training 170, Class 170, BUDS. And I graduated as number one in my class with my entire boat crew. My entire boat crew of six others graduated with me because I wasn't going to let them fail. And I taught them everything I knew
mm.
about breath control and maintaining, calmness under pressure. And so out of 185 people in my class, 19 total graduated, and seven of them were my team. It was pretty cool.
That's incredible. That's
Yeah.
incredible. I gotta just stop you there, Mark. There's so many things, there's so many powerful things that you just mentioned there. And I gotta ask you, did you have any backlash from your family, from your friends, when you went from being a CPA on Wall Street to becoming a SEAL?
No, of course. Well, mostly from my family. My friends kind of knew that about me. Like, I think they knew that I didn't love the business world and I was always working out. You know what I mean? Like, my schedule in New York was I would wake up at 5 and go for a run, and, like a 6 mile run. Then I would go to work. And then at lunchtime, when everyone else would go to lunch, I would go to the gym, bang out a high intensity workout. And this is before anyone even knew what that word meant.
Yeah.
And then after I started the martial art, which was, within 3 or 4 months of me getting to New York, between going to school at night, we had to go to NYU, was down at the old World Trade Center.
Mm.
I think classes started at 7:30 and we were let off at 5. And so I had 2 hours. I'd, sneak in a hour long karate class.
Wow.
Yeah. So I did that 5 days a week or 4 or 5 days a week. It was amazing. So they knew. So my friends didn't give me a hassle. They were actually pleased, excited to see me go.
Mm.
But my family did freak out. Oh my gosh, my mom, was on the floor crying when I told her, and my dad was like, "Why would you throw your life away?" Those types of reactions.
Mm.
It wasn't until they saw me graduate as number one in my class and they came out to the graduation, credit to them, that they started to come around to the idea of their son being a number one Navy SEAL. But they always figured that I would do my 6 years and come back and work for the family business then. And
Yeah.
that never happened, right? So to this day, they're kind of like, they wish that had happened, but it never did.
Yeah. No, of course. I know that when you got the phone call, right, where they said that you've been accepted, I know that that was, you just said Yeah, okay. Like you knew that you were gonna make it in, right?
Hmm.
Uh,
I did.
yeah, and that was so powerful when I heard you say that because like you
Yeah.
already knew that you're in already, and that's amazing to hear.
Well, this is something that's important for your listeners to understand. Within reason, as long as it's within the realm of possible, we create the reality that exists in the world that we see in front of us. It is our creation.
Mm,
And so when I decided to be a Navy SEAL, I was creating that opportunity in my mind. But I also knew that in order for it to be a guaranteed destiny, that I had to create it so strongly in my mind and create all the conditions so that all the obstacles would go away and all the opportunities would present themselves for me to succeed, that I had to back it with just this intensity of belief and vision. And so I made it daily practice. When I would do my daily breathing and meditation practice every morning, I added visualization, and I visualized myself as best I could becoming a Navy SEAL, going through the entire training as best I could, and graduating. And I visualized it every single day, and I added energy to it, added light and energy and emotion. And I now know why this works. But what happened to me is about 9 months after doing this, I had this feeling come over me that was one of no shit certainty that I was going to be a Navy SEAL. And I hadn't even been accepted into the Navy yet. This is the story that you're talking about. In fact, my recruiter was telling me not to get my hopes up because I had statistically a better chance of becoming an astronaut. They were going to take two people that year into the SEALs from the civilian world. But when I had that feeling come over me, I was like, oh, okay. So I've already won it in my mind. I already know that I'm victorious here. So I just have to just see how the chips kind of fall. And about a week later, the recruiter called me, almost with astonishment. He's like, congratulations, Mark, you got in. I was like, yeah, exactly. I kind of knew that. Thanks for, I knew that I was
wow.
going to get this. How could you doubt me? He's laughing. He
Yeah.
goes, man, you guys are weird, right? You guys who want to be SEALs are weird. So I never stopped doing that, right? When I went to war, I visualized myself coming home to my family, and I visualized it every single day. So what happens when you visualize like that and you add it, you believe the visualization, like it's no shit, it's not fake. And you actually also have this, certain set of skills or develop the skills so that you're not, operating in the realm of fantasy
Mm,
and you're able to take action toward it. Then what you're doing is creating a memory of a future,
mm,
right? So without doing this, most people have memories of their past, which are holding them back
mm,
because they're negative, and then they have fantasy about the future. But when you do this well, when you visualize your future self well, you create a memory of the future that starts to stabilize. And as long as it's aligned with your calling, your true calling, and it's something you're passionate about and you have the skills around and you practice this every day, then that memory gets stronger and stronger and stronger until it like acts like this gravitational pull, like a super collider in terms of its gravitational effect. It
mm.
just pulls you right into that outcome.
Yeah. No, of
And that's why you experience these miraculous moments, of synchronicity and people showing up and obstacles falling away, and you have this flow state sense of just total confidence that you're on the right path, that this is it, because everything feels easy.
mm,
And that's what I experienced with the SEALs. I mean, there were days where I was like, wow, this is hard, but never did I waver. Never did I ever question that I wasn't meant to be there. Never did I have the doubts, that lead others to quit. The 85% of the people who quit or
yeah.
don't make it.
I was gonna ask you about that because I know how tough Hell Week is, right? And like you mentioned, so many people drop out because it's so tough. It's
Right.
mentally tough, right? How like did you know? So you obviously knew what your why was, right? During Hell
Hmm.
Week, you knew that you've already passed Hell Week before you
Right.
even entered it, right? Because you visualized passing it. Was there
Right.
ever was there ever a moment that you did, doubt yourself, or you were fearful that that you were going to quit?
No,
Never.
no, not for me. Again, I think it all had to do with this visualization and this belief. I mean, I was there,
Mm,
and there's no way that I was gonna. There's no way. They would have to kill me, right? That was literally the attitude. There's no way I'm leaving. I'm not quitting. I'm not getting injured. And I had to take action to make sure I wouldn't get injured. But, I was a martial artist, so I stretched every day and I knew how to manage my body and my energy and my attitude. So I use these, what I call now the four big skills or the big four skills every day. So every day I practiced my breathing in the morning and then I would control my breathing all throughout the day to nice, slow 5 count in, 5 count out. And that kept me physiologically calm and energized. And then I used positive internal dialogue. So I had a mantra: feeling good, looking good. I ought to be in Hollywood. I'm feeling good and looking good. I ought to be in Hollywood. I use that on every run, every swim, right? And I developed with my team certain positive mantras and sayings, and we would keep ourselves super motivated and we were support each other.
Mm.
So we did what I called taking our eyes off ourselves and putting them on our teammates. So we weren't allowing ourselves to get obsessed in our own little pity parties. We would always look at and say, how can I help my teammate? How can I help my swim buddy? What can I do for the team? And it helps keep you, when you do something good for someone, you leave a carbon copy on yourself.
Yeah.
And it's a very motivating, it's very positive. So that was the second skill. And the third was the imagery I talked about. Because I had practiced that image of graduating from SEALs and getting through Hell Week so much prior to going to the SEALs that it was always with me. All I had to do was just remember it real quickly. I just invoked that memory, and there it is. It's like, and I would have my team in that memory, and I would have my, people who supported me. I knew that I wasn't alone because I had that future self that was counting on me, my current self, to just do the work today. Just all you got to do is just do the work today. And when things got harder and harder, just do the work this hour in this evolution. And when they got harder, just do the work this moment. I remember in Thursday of Hell Week, I got out of some evolution smiling. And one of the instructors was like, God, Divine, you're cocky. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm just having fun. They're like, what? And so he says, I'm going to get you to quit. And so he drags my ass over to this, away from my team, and they carry on. And he goes, okay, we're going to start with 1,000 8 count bodybuilders, which is basically a burpee, but it didn't have the push up. And I'm like, okay. So I'm like, at that point in time, my immediate thought was, I'm just going to do one of these things.
Mm.
I'm just going to do one 8 count bodybuilder 1,000 times. That's all I got to do. So I did one, and
Wow.
then I did another, and I began to say my mantra, right? So I do a 8 count bodybuilder, jump back up, feeling good, looking good, ought to be in Hollywood. Then I do another one, and then I take a breath, right, and do another one. And I got up to like 700, and the instructor just got bored and walked off.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Isn't that funny? Nowadays, when I teach my SEALFIT people, like that's no problem. Like we got a world record in burpees with 5 other people, three men and 3 women, and we did 36,393 burpees in 24 hours. So I ended up doing like 7,400 burpees in 24 hours. So,
That's
back
incredible.
then in SEAL training, I thought 1,000 8 count bodybuild was like a big deal. Now it's like,
Yeah.
nah. One time we did an hour-long plank hold followed by 1,000 burpees. It was pretty
What?
cool. No, I'm sorry. Hour-long plank hold followed by 1,000 push-ups.
That's it.
And
That's
every
crazy.
Veterans Day, we do 1,000 burpees just to raise money for veterans for our Courage Foundation.
You
So
know,
it's
yeah.
just a mindset. It's an uncommon mindset, that you can do these hard things, and once you train yourself to do it, it becomes really, really fun.
You
Really
know,
fun.
it's so funny, like you saying all those stories. Someone who I really admire and who I really look up to, you've actually had him on your podcast, which I've
David
listened.
Goggins,
David Goggins,
of
and
course.
I read his book as well, and he said that at one point, they try the instructors try their best to make you quit, right? To push you and keep pushing you. And at one point, he was just smiling at their face, and he was like, "I took their soul." And he said something about like taking their soul, and he said that instructor did not sleep that night.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, he's like you're literally like him, or like he's like you both have that uncommon mindset. It's something about like the SEALs. I feel like the things SEALs go through, they're literally different to anyone else on this planet. Like
They
I
really
remember
are.
Yeah, I remember you were on a podcast with Tom Bilyeu, is it?
Bill, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, great guy. I love Tom.
Yeah, such a great person to listen to as well. And you was talking about the color system. Can you
Hmm.
just elaborate on that as well? Because I know that was a fun
Sure.
story you had there with the
There's
restaurant.
so many skills that we learn that are just incredibly valuable for just everybody today. So I'm glad you asked that. And it's one of the reasons that I really started to teach. First, I started teaching SEALs. I wanted to make SEALs better,
Mm,
more complete warriors, make better decisions on battlefield, be more survivable, get through SEAL training. And of course, all spec ops, including a lot of British SAS, would come over to our training. But then I opened it up with my company, Unbeatable Mind, so that we could train general population in these skills because, like you said, they're unique. Not only are SEALs unique individuals to be able to endure the training and to all the experiences they get and how they learn to manage their mind and focus and all that, but they learn some really unique tactical and adaptive skills that we call help us operate in an environment we call VUCA environment. VUCA is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, which is what special ops battlegrounds are always like. And so, one of the skills we start learning early in buds is situational awareness, being able to take in more information and to look for patterns that might come together that either declare that there's some sort of danger or opportunity or information that's valuable. So, we're always scanning, looking for information, and just collecting information
mm,
no matter whether we were on a training mission or a real mission, each one of us is an intelligence gatherer while we're also a combatant. And so the Cooper color system was named after a guy named Colonel Cooper, an Army guy. And all it was like an internal a system to codify your internal radar. And so he said that the color white is akin to your radar being turned off.
mm,
And the only time a SEAL was had their radar turned off is if they were like completely shithouse drunk. And even if that were to happen, the SEAL was usually smart enough to have friends who were not
mm.
and who were scanning the environment for threats. 'Cause even that idea of sleeping with one eye open,
Yeah.
that's not white. That's something different. That's like you're ready. So white is sheep. You're a sheep. You're not ready. This stands for the average population that is just going about their business completely ignorant, face buried in their iPhone or their social media account,
Mm,
clueless that they're being manipulated every step of the way, clueless that the wolves are just circling them, ready to pounce. That's white, and that's 99.9% of the global population. So if you're listening to this and you're in white, then you need to listen closely and get out of white and get into yellow. Now, yellow is where you switch on your internal radar, and
mm,
the radar is a metaphor for like a military radar. If you ever seen the TV shows where the boat or the airplane has a radar, and it's like the scan goes around, and it's just going around, and it's passive. Like you don't see anything unless there's a target, and then that pings right as like a yellow dot or a green dot,
mm,
and you hear a little ping, especially in the submarine movies.
mm,
So yellow, living in yellow is as a SEAL becomes our natural state. We train to always be looking for information, always to be scanning for threats, not walking like sneaking around corners and stuff like that, but just expecting that there might be a threat. And so this shows up as like whenever I go to a restaurant, my wife knows enough now that we choose a table in the back and I sit with my back to the wall so I can scan the entrance and I can scan the restaurant while I'm enjoying my meal. Because, right, somebody has to be aware if a lone gunman walks into that or some threat is going to come into that establishment. I have an opportunity to save a lot of lives and at least to save my wife and I.
mm,
That's one example. I teach people this, and I've had people come to me and say, you know what, this is probably one of the most valuable things you taught me. We call them sheepdog skills, because the sheepdog is the one that can protect the sheep from the wolves, right, in society. And so this color system and situational awareness is one of the most powerful sheepdog skills, along with those other skills I talked about: the breath control, the positive self-talk, the imagery, and then the micro goals, being able to just focus on the thing right now that you can do that's going to move you towards safety and away from danger. But I have friends or students who were involved in like mass shootings at Las Vegas, and they called me and said, "Man, you're not going. I can't even believe how valuable your training was because I,
mm,
I I immediately sensed there was danger. I got my family and everyone around me under cover. Cover is going to block their, the shooter's view.
Mm.
Kept them safe. He kept them calm through breathing,
Wow.
by getting them, to slow down and to breathe deeply. And he got them out of the danger zone. Right. I had a principal of a high school call and say that he stopped a mass casualty incident because he was able to breathe deeply and he was scanning and the environment always. And, he got a text that said there was something strange about this one guy who was wearing military pants and had a larger backpack. And so instead of like cowering fear or dismissing it or calling and waiting for, somebody to show up, which is what these, most people would do, he went right into that classroom, right up to this guy,
Wow.
grabbed the bag away from him, grabbed him, took him out of the classroom. And sure enough, he had weapons in his bag and more in his car. And he just completely interdicted a potential disaster. So yellow is you're scanning, scanning, scanning. But like in the situation I just told you about,
Mm.
both situations, if you hear a gunshot or someone texts you and said there's something weird, then suddenly you go to orange. And orange is where you ping a threat. Like your scanner is passively, everything's fine, but I'm alert, I'm aware, I'm going about my business. And then ping, there's a threat. And now your attention collapses to that threat,
Mm.
right? And you're like, I got to deal with this threat right now because this thing is, it's a potential serious crisis.
Mm.
Now, you haven't taken massive action just yet because you still got to investigate the threat. Like if I ping a threat coming into a restaurant, like an aggressive person, and maybe he's walking toward another table and it looks like there's going to be something serious going down. Now I'm in orange, but I haven't shifted to red, which is action yet, because I'm still not quite sure what's going to happen.
Mm.
And because he might just veer off and be going to the bathroom, right? He must be like, holy shit, I got to get to the bathroom. This is an emergency,
Yeah.
you know? Or he might be going after somebody, in which case I would shift to red and get up and, into an offensive, situation where you take action. So red is action. So
Mm.
white is passive, completely ignorant.
Mm.
You're ignoring signals out there that there's threats. Yellow is you're not ignorant. You're passively scanning for threats. You're always scanning, or you're actively scanning. And I should say you're actively and passively scanning, which are two different skills.
Mm.
One is looking, and the other is receiving information, which are two different. And then orange is a threat is pinged. I got to go do something about this, probably, but I'm going to wait for the right signal. And that could be an internal signal that said, go, 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 or it could be something, that develops on the battlefield, so to speak. And
Mm.
then red is massive action. It's a
Wow.
pretty cool little system, but the most important part about it is actually training yourself to be in yellow, orange, and red, right? And there's different types of training, right? Because a lot of people will, because of the fight or flight, even if they can see that there's a threat, they won't do anything about it, right? They'll freeze. And so you have to train your psychology and physiology to either fight or to evade, right? The the difficult situation, which requires some skills training. That's why I'm a big fan of self-defense training like Krav Maga or target focus training,
Mm.
because they're like, or what I trained, which was called SCARS, Special Combat Aggressive Reactionary System, which is SCARS and target focus training are two variants of the same thing. I'll come out of Sansu Kung Fu,
Mm.
and they're just violence of action, get shit done type self-defense systems. It's not a martial art by any stretch of the imagination like my
Mm.
karate was. In fact, I had to unlearn a lot of my karate skills to when I learned those. So those types of things for men and women are really valuable because they help you understand how to scan both passively and actively, and then what to do if suddenly you're the object of a wolf's attention, right? How do you prevent yourself from being a victim?
Yeah.
And believe it or not, it's not that hard because wolves actually are looking for easy prey. They want to prey on sheep. And even we've had people, even with 1 weekend of training, basically they will never be sheep again, right? They've learned enough skills and they have enough confidence to know that they can take some action against that wolf, and that wolf usually will just walk away or run away. And they're not prepared to deal with that.
That's
So
awful.
everyone listening should arm themselves up because we're in a VUCA world, and I don't want you to walk around scared. I just want you to walk around confident. There's
Mm.
a big difference between paranoia and confidence. And I have to tell you, it wasn't until I learned fully how to defend myself by taking another life that I never ever had another altercation, ever had another situation where someone threatened me,
Wow.
because it just that became the new fabric of my matrix, my creation. So I created a new reality with my self confidence. I said, I will never be anyone else's victim. I will never be the subject of someone else's story. I will never be a sheep that's preyed upon by a wolf. And I have the skills to ensure that. And as
Mm.
soon as I started to really believe that, never again was I ever subject or party to any type of violent affront. Isn't that interesting?
Wow, that's
That's how the world works. We create the reality we live in, but it's got to be backed by belief. And so,
yeah,
confidence in your ability to be a sheepdog and defend yourself and others is the only way to actually end violence. And I think that you know this is an interesting subject that we could continue to talk about, but I don't want to go down too much in the rabbit hole.
no, of course, no. I'd love to be a fly on the wall when a bunch of Navy SEALs walk into a restaurant. They all
Yeah, it's
just
kind of fun.
sprint for the wall, right? That's so funny. Yeah,
They're pretty easy to pick out. I mean, not at an individual level, but how we operate as a pack
yeah,
is really different. But you could be standing next to some guy and think, well, that guy's pretty normal. Could be sitting next to a SEAL in church and not recognize it until you look in his eyes. Or in the future, there'll be female Navy SEALs. There aren't any yet.
yeah.
But there's something about a Navy SEAL's eyes that are really different than the average person's.
Mm.
It's hard to describe. We call it the 1,000 mile stare, and it's not a vacant look like shell shock. That's a whole different thing. This is a look that looks right into your soul,
Mm.
and sees you for who you are, and a look of like total confidence
Yeah,
and badassery.
yeah. No, of course, no, of course. I I gotta ask you, Mark. What is your thoughts on when people come out of the military or like the Navy? How are they like? Are they well looked after in America? Because I do hear stories where military people, Navy people, they're not very looked well at when they come
Mm-hmm.
back. Like there's a lot of homeless people that have been in the military. What's your thoughts on that? Have you do you know anyone that's gone through something like that? Is that
Well,
true?
it's not true today. It certainly was true in the Vietnam era, and those vets really got shafted. The way they were treated, and the military didn't have practically any support structures, and the VA was a disaster, and they were just gone. They were just left. There was very little research or support for post traumatic stress. But these days, all the military organizations have kind of come to understand this, and they've been working really hard to create transition programs.
Mm,
There's a ton of nonprofits that have started up to support uh, veterans in transition programs, and the VA has a much better setup. Not, they're still caveman in a lot of ways, but they've got a pretty good setup, and they partner a lot with all these nonprofits to create transitions and support structures. And if someone's got severe post-traumatic stress, there's mostly on the nonprofit side
mm,
that's doing the holistic work. There's a ton of those that are set up to support them.
mm.
And the VA is slowly coming around to that more integrative, holistic approach where they're recommending therapy and yoga, and they're doing studies on psilocybin and ibogaine and stuff like that
Mm.
as therapeutic interventions for severe depression and post-traumatic stress. But as you can imagine, the military isn't going to just recommend or administer, a, a
Yeah.
naturopathic drug or something like that. That they might the better VA hospitals are recommending partners and kind of outsourcing that.
Mm.
So these days, like in the SEALs or the military, they've expanded beyond the SEALs, but like the Honor Foundation is an organization that is nonprofit that puts transitioning spec ops through I don't know how long it is, maybe it's a 2 or 3 month program where they teach them basically civilian skills, and if they are dealing with PTS issues, they'll refer them out to support, connect them with employers and mentors and guides, and then there's organizations that are helping corporations hire really exceptional people out of the military, right? Because now, especially now, post pandemic or even independent, people realize, wow, these people have some extremely valuable skills, but they haven't always done a good job in helping the vets articulate how those skills translate to civilian skills.
mm,
And now we're starting to see that the main skill is character, a value system, team ability, leadership, decision making under pressure, as opposed to having an MBA and knowing how to crunch numbers. That can be taught.
mm,
And so there's organizations that specifically seek to transition and help companies hire vets. Like one of my teammates, Jocko Willens, his company, Echelon Front, has a staffing arm,
mm.
which helps people hire really solid military people. So there's those types of organizations popping up. So that's a long answer to your question. It's a lot better than it used to be.
Yeah.
I think, frankly, that the military um, are much more resilient now than they were because of things like, where the SEALs are now teaching my box breathing and all these other skills now in buds, basic, underwater. The Air Force is doing it. Others will follow shortly. So they're developing pre-resiliency, which is helping them deal with combat. DevGru SEAL Team 6 has a mind gym started by my friend SEAL Rich Davini, which has float tanks, and they do mindfulness meditation and cognitive behavioral therapy and these types of things.
Mm.
So the military is like really getting into the game of optimizing performance and healing. The SEALs have something called the Human Performance Program, which is like all about making sure that SEALs don't break, right? So that they're eating well and they're sleeping well. This is all new. It never existed. It didn't exist when I was in the SEALs. Thank God I had my own program
Yeah.
and I was an innovator, And
Yeah.
so that's why I wanted to teach my version of these skills to other SEALs. And now the SEALs themselves have kind of picked up the mantle and run with it. So I kind of consider that my job done. And my main contribution to Spec Ops wasn't that I was a great combatant leader. I kind of missed the main war effort. I got off active duty in 97 and left the military in 2011. And I only did a year in combat in Iraq where I was in a staff job. So it wasn't like my friend Jocko Willink, who was kicking down doors and,
Mm,
and rounding up bad guys. I didn't have that experience. It wasn't my calling and it wasn't how I was supposed to impact the world.
mm,
But I have made a pretty significant impact in my appreciation for training the body, mind, and the spirit to create a more total warrior. And that now it's really gratifying to see the SEALs start to pick that mantle up, and they recognize where it came from. It's not like they just
yeah.
stole my stuff and brought it in. Like, it's cool that they will never recognize it officially, but the guys know,
Yeah.
that SEALFIT and Unbeatable Mind and Mark Divine in the books and everything really help the SEALs pick up these ancient warrior practices and bring them and to formalize them in the training, which is cool.
Wow. That's
They
so
won't pay me anything, but that's okay. I do it for
yeah.
the team.
No, of course. No, that's so powerful that, you've definitely left your mark, and there's nothing more than that, right? You've
That's
left
right.
your
Yeah.
mark for sure.
It's not about fame or fortune or money. I mean, you can't take that stuff with you, even though you can die trying.
Yeah. No,
It's all
yeah,
about the impact we make and how we show up for our families and for our teams
of course.
and leaving behind no regrets.
No, of course. Yeah, 100%. I got to ask you, Mark, as well. I ask this to a lot of like all my guests, and it's kind of interesting what they say. What would you tell yourself if you could go back in time? What would you tell your younger self?
You know what? I would tell my younger self, it's not your fault.
Hmm.
You're a good person. I love you and I forgive you because
So,
I had some really fucking stupid things I did. and if I could
some
go
of your,
back, and I do the fantasy just like everyone else does. I'm like, if I could go back and, in time and change that, I would. And then I think, no, I wouldn't actually.
hmm, hmm,
No, because that would change the whole string of events and it would mean that certain really important things wouldn't have happened in my life. Now you could say, but other things would have. And I say, but this is my path.
hmm,
But what I can change is my feelings of shame and guilt or lack of being, a good person that I took on when
hmm,
I had those bloopers. so I can change that. That's what I would tell myself.
That's incredible. That's amazing. No, honestly, you just listening to you, I feel so inspired. I just honestly, I know that you've got your courses and your books. What I'll do, I'll leave all the links down below as well, so
Awesome. Thank you.
anyone listening can go and check them out. I've actually got your book lined up now as well, Unbeatable Mind on
Great.
Audible. So that's my
Nice.
next listen, which I'm super excited about. But yeah, no,
By the way, I'm creating the fourth edition of that, and I'll be recording that in my own voice. But the third edition you're listening to is not in my own voice. So I've decided to do all my books in my own voice from now on. So The Way of the Seal I redid. 8 Weeks to Seal Fit, I just came out with an audio book in my own voice. Staring Down the Wolf is in my voice. So Unbeatable Mind, fourth edition will be in my voice. And then guess what? You're gonna laugh at this. My next book
yeah.
is called Uncommon.
No way.
Yes, way.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that so much. And
So
yeah,
we'll get back on your podcast when that comes out. How's it sound?
100%. And please do it in your own voice because
I will.
I feel like that's so powerful.
Yeah.
Um, you know, your voice is really easy to listen to as well. I don't know if you've been told that, but it's
Mm-mm.
easy to the ears, so it's good to listen to your voice. 100%. Yeah.
That's good to hear.
No, thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate everything you've done, everything you're doing. You are definitely an uncommon individual. Like you're just perfect for this podcast. So it's been an honor to have you on. Thank you so much.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you, Murat. I really appreciate it. You have a great day, and to all your listeners, be uncommon. Hoo-yah.